class, we left our character pretty much here. We have the two image planes. We have our character right now is in smooth or high display view. I'm going to go back to 1. I'm going to actually take these two image planes. I'm going to put them on a separate layer than my mesh so that I can turn them off. There we are. So once you have your character at this state, you have to make few important steps to make sure that is ready to actually be rigged. First and foremost, the feet of your character needs to be sitting on top of your grid. So you need to hit W and move it on the Y-axis until when it's on top. In fact, I'm going to move to the front view, and sure enough, it is on top. Another thing you need to make sure is that your pivot point that is here, it is obviously centered. In case it was not centered, and notice if I hit D and hold it, allows me to move it. So let's say you had the pivot point instead down here, you would want to hold the D and move it to be at the center of your character. And I'm going to actually hit Z because it was in the first place. Another thing you need to make sure is that your geometry doesn't have any n-gons. We have talked when we talked about modeling in Maya with polys that we have quads and triangles. Anything that is past that quads, that means having 4 sides, becomes an n-gon, and that type of geometry is really not well supported. It's hard to export it into other software. It is hard to make it work when you go into rigging. So you want to make sure that your character doesn't have any n-gons. You want to make sure that you do something called freeze transformation. That means zero out all the translate and all the rotate. Right now we know we have translate Y that is obviously higher because we moved it up, so it's at 7 something. But in the minute in which you select your character, like we have right now, and you go under modify freeze transformation, now you see that everything is zeroed out. So if for some reason your character ends up moved in the wrong location right here, you can always go in your channel, hit 0, 0, hit return, and it goes back to where it belongs. Lastly, you want to definitely delete the history. So you want to go under edit, delete all by type history. There we are, history. So those are the steps to do to make sure that your character is ready to be rigged, as well as obviously make sure that it's facing front as it is right now, and that is sitting on the grid as we said at the very beginning. So what I want you to do right now though is I want you to open a different character, mainly because whatever you created, oops, sorry, I'm actually zooming in right now. Sorry, Maya seems to be glitchy and turns black. But you guys see that here the knees, the pelvis area does not really have much definition. And I actually want, if I want them to bend, that eventually I will, I'm going to put all the joints in and then I'm going to create bendings and inverse kinematic and etc. etc. If I want those bends to occur, it is important to have more definition. So instead of having you guys all with me go in the model and add more edge loops, what I would like you to do is I want you to open this character class 2 underscore character start and say open. Say don't save, and as you can see, if I zoom into that character, I simply have more edge loops. It's not much different than one we had before, just I have a little bit more geometry for whenever I'm ready to do bending and animating. So I'm ready at this point to put my joint chains in, and the way I'm going to do it is you cannot use the joint tool in perspective view. So the joint tool can be found under animation right here, or it can be found under animation, skeleton joint tool, again, right here. And I want to show you that in order to control the size of your joint, you can go under display, animation, and joint size right here. I have them set at 1. That is actually a pretty good size. And if we realize that they're too small or too big, easily we can change it. So another thing I want to show you is if I double click on my joint tool, I want to show you down here, because the joint orientation is quite important, that the primary axis is X. That means the X axis of your joint will always point into the following child, the child of the chain. And I'm going to show you what it means, having a chain with, you know, a parent, a child, and etc., etc. We'll do it actually next, and I feel like doing it is better than any words I can tell you right now to explain it. Okay, guys, so let's create our joint. I'm going to go in the side view right now. I'm going to zoom onto the upper part because I'm going to create the spine and the head. I'm going to make sure I select my character and I go in shading X-ray so I can really see my joints. And then finally I'm going to click on my joint tool and I'm create the first joint about at the pelvis area right here. And then I'm going to create about 3 or 4 joints for the spine. 1, 2, 3. Here I'm going to do the base of the neck, the top of the neck, and the top of the head, and I'm going to hit return. So now I'm going to go in the front view and I want to make sure that my joint indeed have been created where they needed to be and they're inside my mesh, that they are. The next step is to name them. As you can see, actually right now I'm at joint 1. That is the very first one I created, and I'm going to call it pelvis by clicking on it in the channel and say enter. I'm going to use the down arrow to go and call it spine 1, enter. Down arrow on my keyboard to go to the following joint, 2, return. Down arrow, it's funny, the down arrow takes you to the up joint, but sorry about that. Spine 3. That one is the base of my neck, so I'm going to call it neck base. Notice I'm capitalizing when I have double word. Return. Once again, down arrow, neck, top, return, and lastly I'm going to call this one head. Perfect. So that's my chain. Now I need to do the leg chain and the arm chain. So I'm going to go back into my side view and I'm going to zoom this time onto the leg. Now when I create my next chain, I really need to make sure that I do not click on the pelvis because they need to be 2 separate joints. And in the joint tool, remember, if you click on the last joint, in this case would be the first, but if you click on one of the 2 sides, the extreme of the chain, it will continue that chain that we don't really want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click back on my joint tool and I'm going to click about here. That's the hip. That's the knee. This is the foot, the ball of the foot, the middle of the foot, and lastly the tip of the foot. And I'm going to hit return. Once again, I need to name them. So joint 1, I'm going to call it left, because it's going to be my left leg, hip. And then the following one that again I can hit my arrows to get to. I'm going to hit the down arrow to go down. And this time I'm calling it actually knee, right? So again, I'm going to click on joint 2 and I'm going to call it left knee, down arrow, left ankle, down arrow, left toe, left toe, down arrow. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? The prior one, I'm going to call it left ball, because it's the ball of my foot. Sorry about that. And then this one is left toe. Enter, and lastly I have left toe end. Again, capitalizing all the initials. So now, one thing that you might, I don't know if you're going to like this, if you go in the front view, you'll see that actually that chain, just by the nature of Maya that creates everything on the axis, of the 0, 0 axis, is not in the right spot. So I'm going to hit W and simply move it right where it belongs. Perfect. Now I need to do my arm chain, and the easiest way to do the arm chain is actually in the top view. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go in the top view right here, and this is my arm chain. And what we need to do is a clavicle right here, a shoulder, then an elbow, then a wrist, and then we're going to do a palm, and then we're going to actually do only one finger for the sake of this exercise, just because that way it takes us less time to name all the joints, and honestly we don't have that much time in this class, unfortunately. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to first create kind of like a clavicle right here, then create a shoulder about here, a elbow, a wrist, a palm, base of the middle finger, mid, up, and end. There we are. So what I need to do again, once again, is name everything. So I'm going to call that first joint left clav. Arrow. This one is going to be left shoulder. Down arrow. Oops. Left wrist. Down arrow. Wait, did I mess it up? Shoulder. Sorry, this is not the wrist, it's the elbow. What am I thinking? I was already ahead. And this one is my wrist. Left wrist. And then left palm. And then left finger, base, left finger, mid, and left finger, top, and lastly left finger end. Perfect. Okay, so one thing I want to do, guys, in this arm is actually give the sense of how it's bending a little bit. So if I grab on this, for example, I want to move this elbow to be a little bit back so that I can explain that that's what it does. If I try to move it, it moves the whole chain past that elbow because everything is kind of like, as I said, in a chain format. In fact, I'll show you the outliner that is very clear about that. If I hold the D key and I move in this direction, you see that this time it moves only that one joint. And by the way, as you can guess, my arm once again was created on the ground. So what I need to do is I need to first go and pick my first joint, the left clavicle, and then go in the front view and move it up where it belongs. And here too, if I want to, I can give it some bends. But actually, I'm going to leave it for now. That's good. I move it a little bit higher so it's really indeed in the fingers. So right now I have my spine chain, my leg chain, and my arm chain. What I need to do is I need to mirror this chain and this chain to the other side. And now you will understand why I call them left, why calling them left was so important. So the next step is to pretty much mirror to the opposite direction. And as you can imagine, if you have that first root joint selected, and before I do anything else, I told you I was going to show you the outliner. Actually, let me go in this beautiful little button that will show me those. You can see how in the outliner it's very clear in the case of this arm that we start from left clavicle, and left clavicle has a child called left shoulder that has left elbow. So it's all in a beautiful chain in which I have kind of like a parent-child situation. And that happens for the leg part and for even the spine part. So let's actually, maybe what we do is we can start from the leg to do the mirroring. Actually, let's do it from the arm since it's already selected. So what I need to do right now is going to go under skeleton, and this time I'm going to go in mirror joint and options. So what is important we do there is we want to look and change these values. That means look at what's in this interface. What is the axis we're mirroring to? And if you look at the Maya axis, is the YZ. So we're in good shape. YZ is in good shape. Here, I'm basically telling search in the name of all these joints for everything that says left. And when you mirror it to the other side, replace it with right. So that's what we need to do. Just look carefully of this interface, make sure it's correct. And this is actually left over from other times I've done it. Obviously, I have the practice to always call it a certain way. So you could call it LT and RT if you like. It doesn't have to be left and right. It's more my habit. But I'm going to say mirror right now. And as you can see, it created the mirror on the other side. And sure enough, in the outliner, you see that this time, instead of left clavicle, it's called right clavicle. Then inside has right shoulder. Then inside has right elbow, and etc., so forth, so and so on. So I'm going to do the same thing with the leg. I'm going to select the left hip, the first joint, and I'm going to do the same exact thing in terms of mirroring. So I'm going to go in skeleton, mirror joint. Okay, now we need to connect this entire chain. And the way we're doing it is we're going to, once again, do it through the idea of the parent and the child. So what you need to do is you need to first select the child. In this case, I'm going to take the left hip. And this one is the right hip, right? Yeah, perfect. I'm going to select the child. I'm going to hold the shift key and click on the pelvis. And I'm going to hit P. And as you can see, it created a connection between those. And now when I open my pelvis, I see that my left hip chain is a child of my pelvis. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to select the other side. I'm going to hold and choose the pelvis, and I'm going to shift click on the pelvis, and I'm going to hit P once again. Same thing happened. Now the pelvis has the left hip and the right hip as children. That is perfect. I'm going to do the same thing here. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to look at, this one is the joint called spine 3, and this one is the one called the neck base. And these one are actually the clavicles pretty much, right? The left clavicle and the right clavicle. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to actually parent the clavicle with the top of the spine. Now, one thing I want to do, by the way, that I haven't done in the past and I generally do is I'm going to create a layer for the mesh, and I'm going to have a layer for actually all the bones. So I'm going to shift click all this, and I'm going to create a separate layer for it. So the first layer is just my model, and the second layer is my bones. In fact, let me actually name it. So this is going to call the mesh, save. This one I'm going to call bones, save. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the mesh so I can see better what's going on. And I'm going to decide what do I do, and actually I could have another one with the eyes. Let me do that too. Sorry, guys. It's important to me to be organized and separate things so that it's easy to know what they are and select them, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to parent this with this bone right now. So I'm going to hold the shift key. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to hit P. And I'm going to do the same exact thing with this one. Shift, and I'm going to hit P. So at this point, I have, if I go and select my, what I call my root joint, that is the pelvis, you see that the pelvis has underneath the spine, has the left hip and the right hip, all beautifully organized into a parent-child